At 10 years old, I ran my mom's vitamin distribution business. I had 47 regular customers, detailed sales records, and made $600 a week. When police found my notebook, I proudly showed them my business model. I was only 10 years old, but I felt like the CEO of a small company. Every Saturday morning, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my notebook and a box of envelopes, carefully counting out the week's collections. 47 customers. Over $600. All of it handled by me, like I was running a real business. My mom called it vitamin distribution, and I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She always said we were helping people stay healthy. My name is Ryan, I'd say to anyone who asked, puffing my chest out a little. I'm 10, and I run a vitamin business with my mom. It sounded impressive, even to me. My teachers raised their eyebrows when I talked about it during show and tell, but I just thought they were surprised by how organized I was. I carried my customer list everywhere, a battered spiral notebook where I wrote down names, addresses, amounts owed, and delivery times. To me, this wasn't just a job. It was proof that I was responsible, that I could do something important. I loved showing my friends how I organized my accounts. Look, I told my best friend, Eric, once, pointing at my notebook. Mr. Thompson always buys 2 bottles every week. He says it makes him feel younger. Eric stared at me like I was some kind of genius. I liked that look. It made me feel grown up. Mom was proud of me, too. At least, that's what I thought. Sometimes, she'd pat my shoulder and say, "You're my best business partner, Ree." But lately, she'd been different. She'd get these frantic looks on her face when the phone rang, or she'd rush out in the middle of dinner to check on a customer. She'd sit up late at night, her hands shaking as she counted money, muttering numbers under her breath. I figured she was just tired. Running a business was hard work. One Tuesday evening, I came home from school with a big smile. I'd collected over $100 that day and even convinced Mr. Hall to start buying vitamins for his wife. "Look, Mom," I said, waving the bills like a trophy. But instead of smiling, she froze. Her eyes darted to the window like someone was watching us. "That's great, baby," she said, stuffing the money into her purse. "I need to step out for a bit. Can you handle things if anyone calls?" She didn't wait for my answer. She just grabbed her coat and ran out the door. I watched her car speed off, my stomach twisting. I didn't understand why she looked so scared. To me, everything was fine. We were making good money. We had happy customers. Wasn't that what business was all about? The next morning started like any other. I was halfway through my cereal when I realized I couldn't find my notebook. Panic hit me like a punch. That notebook had everything: names, orders, the exact amount of money each customer owed. Without it, I was lost. I tore apart my backpack, checked under my bed, even asked Mom if she'd seen it. She was in the kitchen, chain-smoking and pacing. "Mom, I can't find my book," I said, holding back tears. "The one with all the customer lists." She froze for half a second before flicking her cigarette into the sink. "Don't worry about that right now, Ryan. Just get ready for school." "But, Ryan," her voice was sharp enough to stop me cold. I nodded, grabbed my backpack, and walked out the door, my stomach in knots. At school, I tried to shake it off. I told myself I'd find the notebook when I got home. But around noon, everything changed. I was sitting in math class when the intercom buzzed. "Ryan Peterson, please come to the principal's office." My classmates oohed and whispered, like I was in trouble. I wasn't worried. I figured maybe Mom had dropped off my notebook. I even smiled as I walked down the hall. But the moment I stepped into the principal's office, my stomach dropped. There were 2 police officers sitting there. A man in a suit I didn't know, and a woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Ms. Lopez, a social worker. Everyone was staring at me like I'd done something wrong. "Hi, Ryan," the principal said carefully. "Why don't you have a seat?" I sat down, trying to look calm. "Did you find my notebook?" I asked, glancing around the table. "Notebook?" the officer repeated. "Yeah, for my business. My vitamin deliveries. I keep track of everything in there. Payments, schedules, all that stuff." I smiled proudly, thinking they'd be impressed. I have 47 customers, and I make over $600 a week. I even collect payments from the Thompsons on Thursdays. The adults exchanged looks. Uneasy looks. The kind you give someone when you don't know how to answer. "Ryan," Ms. Lopez said softly, "can you tell us more about this vitamin business?" I nodded, excited to share. I told them all about my deliveries, how I handled money, how I made sure everyone got what they paid for. "Mom says I'm her best business partner," I added, grinning. But no one smiled back. The officer scribbled something in his notebook. The principal cleared his throat. My chest tightened. What was going on? "Ryan," Ms. Lopez said again, her voice gentle but serious, "your mom had to go take care of something. You're going to stay with a friend of hers for now, okay?" "Wait, what? But what about the customers? I still have to make deliveries." "It's okay, sweetheart," she said, standing up. "Let's get your things." I followed her, confused and a little scared. As we walked to the car, I kept thinking about my missing notebook. If they were going to ask questions about the business, I needed that notebook. Without it, how could they see how good I was at this? Ms. Lopez drove me across town, talking softly about how I'd be staying with a family friend for a while. I didn't really listen. My head was full of worry about the business. If I didn't deliver the vitamins on time, people might stop trusting me. What if Mr. Thompson needed his usual 2 bottles? What if Jennifer, one of my best customers, called my mom and no one answered? The car stopped in front of an apartment complex I didn't recognize. Ms. Lopez smiled at me in that careful way adults do when they're hiding something. We'll just be here for a bit, okay? Jennifer's going to help out while your mom takes care of some things. Jennifer was standing by the door when we got out. She looked different, her eyes red like she'd been crying, her hands trembling as she hugged me. "Hi, buddy," she said softly. "Come inside." "Jennifer." I grinned, relieved to see someone from the business. "You won't believe it, I think I got 2 new customers last week. Oh, and I made all the Thursday collections early. I'm keeping everything super organized." I started rattling off my plans, thinking she'd be impressed like always. But she wasn't smiling. She looked scared. "Ryan, honey," she said gently, "maybe you shouldn't talk about that right now." "Why not? This is important. The business doesn't just stop, Jennifer. I mean, what if someone's out of vitamins? What if—" She cut me off, her voice breaking. "Ryan, do you know what's really going on?" I frowned. "What do you mean? We sell vitamins. People pay. We deliver. It's simple." Her lip quivered like she was trying not to cry. "It's not simple, sweetie. It's not." She stopped herself, turning away to wipe her face. Something in my stomach turned cold. Jennifer was always cheerful when I brought her orders. She even called me her little business whiz. But now she looked like she wanted to be anywhere but here. "Jennifer," I asked, my voice small, "is something wrong with Mom? Did I mess something up?" She shook her head quickly. No, sweetheart. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong." Her voice cracked, and before I could ask more, she started crying, really crying. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, clutching my backpack, feeling like I'd walked into the middle of a story I didn't understand. Later, Jennifer drove me to her apartment. She was quiet, gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. I tried to make conversation. "Do you think we should call the Thompsons? I can still deliver their order if you let me. I even have the cash from last week." "Ryan," she said suddenly, her voice sharp in a way I'd never heard before. "Please stop talking about the vitamins." I froze, hurt and confused. "But that's my job. I'm helping Mom. I'm good at this." She pulled over, breathing fast. "You're just a kid," she whispered, almost to herself. Then she covered her face with her hands and started sobbing again. I wanted to tell her to stop crying, that everything was fine, but for the first time, I wasn't sure. Why was everyone acting like I'd done something wrong? By the time we reached her apartment, I felt heavy and quiet. Jennifer tried to smile at me, but her eyes were swollen. I sat on the couch while she made a few phone calls in the kitchen. I could hear her voice shaking as she said my name. I hugged my backpack and stared at the floor, thinking about the business, about Mom, about how none of this made sense. That night at Jennifer's apartment, I barely slept. I kept going over the numbers in my head, thinking of all the customers who would be expecting their vitamins. If I didn't deliver on time, people would start asking questions. What if someone thought I'd stolen their money? My stomach twisted at the thought. I wasn't a thief. I was just trying to help Mom. The next morning, a woman I didn't recognize came to pick me up. She introduced herself as Ms. Green, a social worker, and explained that I'd be staying somewhere safe for now. I didn't really understand what was happening, but she talked to me like I was younger than 10, using a slow, careful voice that made me feel small. "Where's Mom?" I asked as we drove away from Jennifer's. "She's busy right now," Ms. Green said. "The grown-ups are trying to figure some things out." I didn't know what that meant, but I nodded. The car pulled up to a big, brick building with a playground out front. Kids were running around, shouting, while a few adults stood nearby with clipboards. "This is just for a little while," Ms. Green said as she walked me inside. The shelter felt like a cross between a school and a group home. There were dorm-style rooms with bunk beds, and I got assigned to a bed near the window. I kept my backpack close, like it was my briefcase. Even in that moment, I couldn't stop thinking about my customers. Later, a lady named Mrs. Carter, who worked at the shelter, asked me what I liked to do. I told her I ran a business. She gave me a puzzled smile, but I explained anyway. I told her about the customer list, how I handled the money, and how I made sure people got their vitamins on time. She just kept nodding, but I could tell she didn't get it. "You're very organized, Ryan," she said kindly. "But maybe right now, you should just relax and be a kid." Be a kid? Didn't she understand how important this business was? I felt like everyone was talking down to me. That afternoon, They introduced me to a child therapist named Dr. Henson. He had a soft voice and a lot of colorful pens. He asked me to draw what my business looked like. I drew bottles lined up on a shelf with dollar signs next to them. Can you tell me about these vitamins? He asked. They help people, I said, proud of my answer. Mom says they make people feel better, and I'm the one who delivers them. I keep track of everything. I'm the best helper. Dr. Henson exchanged a quick glance with Ms. Green, like there was something I wasn't being told. Ryan, do you ever wonder what's inside those bottles? His question caught me off guard. I never thought about it. They were just vitamins, weren't they? That night, lying on the top bunk, I stared at the ceiling. Something didn't feel right. I was starting to notice that no one treated this like a real business. And if it wasn't, then what was it? 2 days later, I found out the truth, at least, the part they were willing to tell me. I was sitting in the common room of the shelter, watching some kids play a board game, when Mrs. Carter called me over to the TV. Ryan, honey, she said softly, you should see this. The news anchor's voice was calm, but serious. A photo of my mom flashed across the screen, and my heart jumped. Local authorities have arrested 34-year-old Amanda Peterson on charges related to the distribution of controlled substances. I didn't understand at first. The word substances sounded harmless enough. But then they showed the police carrying boxes from our house, the same boxes I used for deliveries, and suddenly, I felt like I couldn't breathe. No, I whispered. Those are vitamins. That's my mom's business. Mrs. Carter turned the TV down and crouched in front of me. Ryan, I know this is hard to hear, but the things your mom was selling, they weren't vitamins. I just shook my head. That's not true. You don't know what you're talking about. But deep down, I felt something crack. I spent the rest of the day in a fog. Kids tried to talk to me, but I barely heard them. When Dr. Henson asked me to come to therapy, I sat on the floor and stared at my shoes. Ryan, he said gently, can you tell me what you're feeling right now? I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt tight. Finally, I blurted out, they're lying about my mom. She's not bad. She wouldn't hurt anyone. I believe you love your mom, Dr. Henson said carefully. But sometimes, grown-ups can make bad choices, and they might involve children without meaning to. That doesn't mean she doesn't care about you. I felt my eyes burn. I was helping her, I said. I was good at it. I made sure all the customers paid. I even kept everything in order. I paused, my voice breaking. Does that make me bad too? No, Ryan, he said quickly. You didn't know? None of this is your fault. But I wasn't sure I believed him. The next morning, they let me watch another news report. This time it was worse. They showed pictures of our house, the police cars lined up outside, and a headline that read, Mother used child to distribute drugs. The words made my stomach twist. Used child. That was me. In group therapy that afternoon, I couldn't focus. Other kids were talking about their families, but I just sat there, gripping the edge of my chair. One of the boys leaned over and whispered, Hey, isn't your mom the one on the news? I froze. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. I jumped up and ran out of the room. Mrs. Carter found me sitting on the steps outside, hugging my knees. Ryan, she said softly, putting a hand on my shoulder, none of this is your fault. You're not in trouble. You're just a kid who tried to help his mom. Her words were kind, but they didn't fix the hole in my chest. For the first time, I realized that everything I thought I was good at, the collections, the deliveries, the business, was just part of something terrible. My whole sense of pride turned to shame. And then came the worst blow. Someone mentioned in passing that my mom's lawyers were trying to argue she'd used me as a cover for her operation. It hit me like a punch to the gut. She hadn't just let me help, she had used me. That night, lying in my bunk, I cried so hard my pillow was soaked. After the news reports and therapy sessions, I stopped thinking of myself as a businessman. That title, the one I wore like a badge of honor, now felt like something dirty. I didn't even want to open my old backpack where I'd kept the cash and notes. It was like every number I wrote down was proof that I'd been part of something wrong. A week later, they told me I'd be moving into foster care. You'll be with a family in Cedar Hills, Ms. Green explained. They have 2 other kids around your age. They're kind people, Ryan. I think you'll like it there. The family, Mr. and Mrs. Howard, welcomed me like I was one of their own, but it was hard to trust that. They had a neat little house with photos on the walls and a big golden retriever that wagged its tail every time it saw me. It all felt too normal, too safe. The first few nights, I stayed in my room, staring out the window. I thought about Mom. Was she eating? Was she scared? I hated her for what she'd done, but I also missed her so much it hurt. Therapy didn't stop when I moved in with the Howards. Dr. Henson visited once a week, and he kept asking me to talk about my business. At first, I didn't want to. But one day, I told him everything. The customers, the deliveries, the money. I counted like a little accountant. You were smart and resourceful, Dr. Henson said. But being smart isn't just about making money. It's about knowing what's right. Those words stuck with me. For the first time, I started to understand that being good at something didn't mean it was good for me. At the Howards, I started doing regular kid things, like playing basketball in the driveway with their son, Luke. At first, I was terrible. I'd get frustrated, wanting to control the game like I used to control my delivery schedule. Luke just laughed and said, "You don't have to be good right away. It's just a game. A game, not a business." That was a new thought for me. Mrs. Howard signed me up for a youth soccer team. The first practice was weird. I kept thinking about efficiency and time management, like I was still stuck in that old mindset. But by the second week, I started to enjoy it. Running around with other kids, chasing the ball, falling and getting back up. It felt good to just be a kid again. At group therapy, I even began helping other kids who'd gone through things like me. One boy, Tyler, told me his dad used him to shoplift. I told him how I thought I was running a business, but it turned out I was just being used too. "We're not bad kids," I said. "We just didn't know better." Every time I said things like that, I felt a little lighter, like I was peeling away the guilt piece by piece. I still thought about my old business strategies sometimes, but now I saw them differently. They weren't my proudest moments. They were survival. And survival was fine, but I wanted more than that. By the time I was 17, I had learned how to separate who I was from what had happened. The memories of running the business were still there, but they didn't control me anymore. I'd spent years in therapy, countless hours trying to understand that I was never the problem. I was just a kid who wanted to make his mom proud. I lived with the Howards through middle school and most of high school. They gave me a stable home and treated me like their own son. Mrs. Howard never missed a game when I started playing soccer for my school team. Mr. Howard helped me with homework, even when I was too stubborn to ask. They never once brought up my past unless I wanted to talk about it. When senior year rolled around, my guidance counselor suggested I apply to college. At first, I laughed. I didn't see myself as a college kid. But then I thought about everything I'd been through, the confusion, the shame, the hard lessons, and I realized I wanted to help other kids like me. Kids who had been pulled into adult problems they didn't understand. So I applied to a few schools with good social work programs. I didn't expect to get in, but one afternoon, a big envelope arrived in the mail. I tore it open, and there it was, an acceptance letter. I just sat there on the porch, staring at it. For the first time in years, I felt something like pride, but real pride this time. Not because I was making money or running a business, but because I was building a future that actually meant something. The summer before graduation, I went back to my old neighborhood, not to see Mom. She was still serving time and had written me letters I wasn't ready to read, but to see what was left of the world I once thought was normal. The street looked smaller, darker. Some of the houses were abandoned. I recognized a few of Mom's old customers, but they looked tired and worn down. Jennifer was one of the only people who seemed happy to see me. She hugged me tightly and said, "I'm so proud of the man you're becoming, Ryan." Her eyes were glossy when she told me she'd been clean for almost 2 years. Hearing that gave me hope. Hope that people could change, no matter how far they'd fallen. After graduation, I started volunteering at a local advocacy center. We worked with kids who'd been caught in situations like mine. Kids who thought they were helping their parents, but really, they were being used. I led small group sessions, talking about my past in simple, honest ways. I thought I was some kind of businessman, I'd tell them. But I was just a kid who didn't know better. You can be more than what you were pulled into. It felt good to turn my pain into something that could actually help people. I even started designing programs for foster parents, teaching them how to recognize signs of manipulation or exploitation in the kids they cared for. Every time I spoke, I remembered that confused 10-year-old kid who thought profit was the same as success. I wanted to make sure no other child had to learn that lesson the hard way. The day I packed for college, Mrs. Howard hugged me like she didn't want to let go. "We're so proud of you, Ryan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your story's just starting." I thought about that on the drive to campus. She was right. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting something new. And for once, I didn't need a notebook full of customer names to prove my worth.